Shalom, welcome to part 2 of the talks on Yom Kippurim. This day of coverings and reconciliations is the 6th step in a 7-step process of salvation, and the first step begins with Pesach or Passover, where the penalty of sin is paid for by the death of the Messiah, and the doorway is freely open to all the family home, or open to the family home for all who would walk through it, and all who would avail themselves of this doorway become spiritual beings, even eternal beings. But where they spend their eternity depends on the next step. One is a step that nearly all Christendom fails to take, and that's the step of matzah. And they fail to take it because they think that all this has been done away with, and due to that they've got no understanding whatsoever of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that is where the consequences of sin is dealt with. The penalty for sin is death, but the consequences of sin is eternal separation from the source of life, from Yahuwah. And it is separation of the soul, the sinful soul. But what matter represents, is the separation of sin from the soul. So where sin is dealt with, the penalty of sin is dealt with, in matzah the sin itself is dealt with. And that's what most people miss, and that is so sad. Step 3 of the 7-step plan is Bukurim, or first fruits. This is a harvest, and the Messiah was the first fruits of the harvest, showing that his Passover sacrifice was fully acceptable to the Father, and that him being separated for 3 days and 3 nights from the Father. But remember what Messiah said, my God, it actually is pronounced as my God is actually my mighty authority, why have you forsaken me? Father, even though it's his Son that died in our place, and our sin was, in a sense, he paid the price for our sin, he couldn't look upon him. He had to be separated from the Father for our sakes. But Bukurim shows that his sacrifice was acceptable, and the door was completely and fully opened. And this is where the first sheath of the harvest is waved before Yahuwah. It is the first and the best, with the Messiah being the very first and being the very best of the harvest of souls. So through this free gift, the doorway to the heavenly home was fully open to all who would willingly walk through it and get on his path, which is the narrow path of straightness, otherwise known as righteousness. In other words, to be righteous or a righteous person is one who walks a straight path, and that straight path is a path that our Father laid out in his Torah, prophets and Psalms, especially in his Torah, his instructions on how to live. But sadly, most will never walk through the doorway and get onto that narrow path. They stand there amazed at the open door. They stand there amazed at the blood on the doorpost and the lintels. They even worship at the door at the free gift of its opening, but they never walk through it. They think they do not have to, that standing there and looking is enough. Standing there and praising is enough. It's not. They do not believe, nor will they accept, at this moment at least, that they have to cross the threshold. They have to walk his, Yahuwah's, instructions. They think that they know better. They think that it's all been done away with, and they will not listen to reason even when it's presented to them. And this is so very sad, for the billions standing there looking at the way home but will never enter in. And that is the high cost of religion. Not nice. The 4th step on the path of salvation is Shavuot, or the Assembly of Sevens. This is where Yahuwah met with Israel and the sojourners at the mountain 50 days after the leaving Mitzrayim, or the Crucible, or it's now called Egypt. And he gave his instructions for living with the Creator and with one another in his land. These prescribed instructions and rulings are the prescriptions for living eternally with Yahuwah in his family home. These instructions were given to all who would come out of Mitzrayim, but they were also given to us in this present day. and they are not now, and they never will be, eternally redundant. I mean, we're told that the Torah, his law, which is actually his Torah, his instructions, will be written on our very hearts. So if they're going to be written on our hearts, are our hearts done away with? Oh, of course not. No. These instructions are going to be written on our hearts, and they're here forever. You know, he often tells us to willingly choose to protect, this is Shema, willingly choose to Shema, which is protect, preserve, investigate, keep, and do all of his instructions and live. But he also tells us that we have the right to choose, by our own volition, not to keep, protect, guard, and do his instructions, and we can rightfully choose to ignore all his words. But in that choice we are left with the curses, and we curse ourselves by not heeding his words. He doesn't have to curse us at all. He's not a cursing God that comes down from the heavens and said, I curse you because you broke this, or you broke that, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. No, we curse ourselves by not following his prescribed instructions for healthy living, spiritual and physical. And Christianity willingly chooses, and Christians itself willingly choose by their own volition and by the listening of the lies of their fathers to throw out and ignore all these instructions of Yahuwah. And so they will curse themselves and die. The sheep who follow the lies will not enter life or eternal life. But the Christians who teach the lies will spend eternity with their father, the adversary, the father of lies. And Judaism, those in Judaism are just as bad. They negate the instructions by adding so many man-made traditions to them that they get bogged down in the mire of quicksand, devouring all who enter into it. Again, the sheep who are taken in by the lies will simply cease to exist at the end of their lives. But the teachers, the rabbis and the like, they will spend their eternity in the one-dimensional construct of time with their father Satan. And it is so sad. There is still time for people to turn away from this and to turn on the right path, the path of his written Torah. Now that leads us to the fifth step, called Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets. This is a day for blowing the trumpets for the autumn harvest, but which represents the harvest of souls just before the 7-year tribulation period. And some believe this will be in the form of a rapture type of thing, where those who are part of Yahuwah's family are taken from this earth. I am not one of those who believe so. I believe this is a shouting of a warning, absolutely. And it's a shouting of a warning that the tribulation time is upon us, that the anti-Messiah is walking this earth and going to kill and ensnare so many souls. But I also believe that there will be souls that are gathered as in a harvest, but not to some place off this world into a different dimension of existence, but to a pre-prepared sanctuary, or pre-prepared sanctuaries, places of safety. As Noah was in the ark, so it will be with our individual arks. Now, I could be wrong, I accept that. But individual places of safety that our Yahuwah will get people to set up for his children to go to. I know I could be wrong indeed, but the second option of sanctuary seems to be far more in keeping with the general context of Scripture. I mean, again, for example, apart from Noah, look at the Hebrews as they were settled in Goshen when the 7 years of famine came upon the land. And that's a good picture of the 7 years of tribulation coming upon us. They were set into a land which was the only place in that region that was green and fertile. And there are other examples throughout Scriptures. And the shofar was either blown as a great celebration or a great warning to the people of the land. Now the time is coming when we have to blow it as a great warning. On some day in the future, we will be blowing a dire warning to the inhabitants of the earth, the great dangers and distress that is about to come upon them, and for the family to go into the places of safety, the pre-prepared places of safety. Yom Teruah is about blowing the warning that the anti-Messiah is upon us and death follows in his wings. Now this brings us to the 6th assembly meeting, the step under consideration, the Day of Coverings and Reconciliations, Yom Kippurim. Verse 27 starts with surely, indeed, with absolute certainty. The Hebrew ak is a particle of emphasis. It is something to take special note of, something we must pay close attention to, something we must take special care of. So knowing we are to take special care of what comes, something that what is coming in the next words is something to pay close attention to take note of, and to come to an understanding of. How can we think that we've got a right to purposely mislead, purposely mistranslate or change in any way the words which are given? We do not have the right to change these words in any way, shape or form. We must make special note of these words as they are written and as they are given. If we change or misrepresent these words to suit our own personal understanding or the accepted understanding of the majority, or the accepted understanding of tradition, then we destroy the whole plan of salvation for those we deceive. And don't get me wrong, we are deceiving, and the price for us will be horrendous. I mean, what does Messiah say about causing the least of one of his children to stumble? That stumble will not be lost. It's better for him to have a millstone put round the neck and cast into the deepest sea. And it's like, you know, a little bit of leaven changes the whole nature of the bread, of the dough. It really does change the nature. Yeast changes the nature of the dough that's in the bread. That's why unleavened bread is important. Its unchanged nature. So a lie, even a small lie, leavens the whole dough of truth. It changes the very nature of the truth into a lie. Until in the end there exists nothing but nothing of the truth. It'll all be a lie. See, there only exist two things. There's either truth or lies. There's no such thing as a half-truth. A half-truth is a lie. End of story. It's like when you multiply any positive number by a negative number, the answer will always be a negative. If you multiply a negative, which is a lie, against any amount of truth, all of that truth ends up being negative. Becomes a lie. So we've got to be very careful and very conscious when we're dealing with the words of our Father in the heavens. And this is why sometimes it's very difficult for me to talk about such things, because I often question myself, am I right? Am I right? Could this be right? I have to question myself at all times. But no matter how much I've looked, I cannot find where I am wrong so far. But I'm always questioning, because it's too important not to. So this is something that we must take special note of. We must be very, very careful about and take a lot of care about. So let's look at the next words. And on this 10th day of this 7th restored moon, and as we shall see at verse 32, the word Yom, translated day in this section, is only referring to the daylight portion of the 10th day, not the whole 24-hour day. And verse 32, which we will look at in due course, tells us that we are to keep the day of coverings and reconciliations from the evening portion of the 9th day until the evening, but not including the evening portion of the 10th day, making it a 24-hour assembly meeting, but held over 2 different days. But the thing is, we have to guard and preserve it from evening to evening, from the evening of the 9th day to the start of the evening of the 10th day. Okay, this is important because the Day of Coverings is a 24-hour assembly. It covers 1 full day but spread over 2 days. So, question: how can this be if the day cycle starts in the evening? If the day cycle starts in the evening, as all Judaism states and 95% of the Messianic movement states and agrees with, Then the evening of the 9th day, the start of Yom Kippurim, is followed by the daylight period of the 9th day. Then that is followed by the evening part of the 10th day, which starts the 10th day, which is again followed by the daylight portion of the 10th day. And as it comes into evening, after the daylight hours, or the daylight portion, then Yom Kippur ends. Now, by my count, isn't that a total of 2 lots of 24-hour days? 2 sets of 24 hours, or 2 days? How can this be if Yom Kippurim is a one-day assembly meeting? Good question, isn't it? You know, some people say that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but I tell you this, Father writes his words so the simple can understand it. So that we, simple-minded people, can understand it and follow it and make it our own and put it into practice in our lives. Simple as that. Now, if we take that day cycle and it starts at dawn rather than in the evening, then you've got the 9th day starts at dawn, then it comes up to the evening of the 9th day, which again is preceded by the daylight hours of the 9th day, and that's the start of Yom Kippurim, when the evening starts on that 9th day. Now, as the evening comes to an end, it goes into darkness and it draws into dawn, then starts the daylight portion of the 10th day, which is then followed by the evening of the 10th day. Now, if Yom Kippurim starts on the evening of the 9th day and finishes as evening comes on the 10th day, then this is a 24-hour period, and it lines up with Scripture and fits so beautifully with "you shall keep it from evening to evening." But if you look at that, "you shall keep it from evening to evening," that's the only time when a Sabbath or a called-out assembly meeting we're told to keep it from evening to evening, because that means we're keeping it from the 9th evening to the start of the 10th evening, evening to evening. Every other Sabbath we keep it starts at dawn. For me, I keep it to the following dawn, so that's a 24-hour period, but it's mainly for Sabbath, it will be the daylight hours, but you don't do no work in the evening time. You know, it's so easy to stick by so I used to be a follower of the evening to evening cycle, but when I started seeing all these evidences, I had to change my way of thinking. It would be easy to swim with the tide, with the traditions, with everyone else, and it's difficult going against the tide at times. It is difficult. The stuff you face from people and the names you're called is incredible. But if this is what the word says, then this is what we must follow, or we must choose to follow or not. Me, I choose to follow it, and to me it's that simple. So, as we can see, the dawn to dawn day cycle is the only one which works and fits perfectly with these written words of Yahuwah about Yom Kippurim. Now, we can hold to the tradition, as I said, and the teachings of the rabbis and the messianic leaders, and say that the scriptures, the very words of our Creator, are wrong, or we can say the rabbis are wrong, and all who teach the like are wrong, and the words of Yahuwah are right and good. That's our choice. That is an individual choice we all have to come to. I, for one, accept Yahuwah's words as true and reliable, and they lead to freedom. That men, especially religious men, lie, deceive, in order to imprison and control the minds of the masses. So for want of a better term, my money is on the Creator and not on man. Okay, the next word of interest is Kodesh, rendered as restored moon. Again, tradition dictates that the moon we should be following for the timing of the assembly meetings is either the new moon, which is a dark conjunction moon, or the first sliver after the dark moon. And I believe both are very wrong indeed. You can see that my discussions, my talks on that on YouTube, and also there's a paper on that as well. But the main reason is in Bereshit, Genesis account of the 4th day of creation. And again, for a fuller explanation of that, you can see the talk. I would see my paper and hear the talk on it, on the matter. But the creation account tells us that there are 2 luminaries set in the cosmos. the greater luminary to govern the day and the which sets the timing of the days and the years, and the lesser luminary to rule and govern the night, as well as setting the times for the Moedim. That is the called out assembly meetings Yahuwah instituted, which this is one of them. Now, but I'll come back to the luminaries in a short time. But first, the word Kadesh. This Hebrew word means to renew, to make something like new through repair, restoration, replacement, something that is fully renewed, restored and repaired. Some say that the first crescent of the moon is the restored moon. The light has been restored to it, but I disagree totally with that. A fully restored moon is one that is giving off its fullest potential of illumination, which is the light reflected from it at its fullest potential. That is, the light is complete on the face of the moon. Which brings us back to the luminaries of day 4. The lesser luminary shines in the night sky. When it is fully illuminated, it has dominion of the night sky. We can even go out with a clear sky without a torch or a lamp of some description. We can see by its reflected light, and it's quite frankly, it's beautiful. But the first sliver, when the dark moon phase is just passing and it gives off a tiny piece of light, I agree that the renewal process has started, absolutely, but it is not fully restored. It has just started the journey of restoration. So the sun fully shines and brightly in the day, so the lesser luminary shines fully and brightly in the night. And that's what an illumination is, something that gives off light. And this is the moon, by which we set the timing for the feast. The fully restored, fully illuminated moon, the full moon. You know, when you think about it, the dark moon, that is the moon in conjunction, gives no light whatsoever, and can only be seen and fully appreciated when there's a full eclipse of the sun by the moon, when the earth, moon and sun are in conjunction during the daylight hours. Now, you can see the darkness in the natural state of the moon in that conjunction. So, if the dark moon, the conjunction moon, is unseen in normal times and under normal circumstances, how can it be used for the timing of the feast? You can't see it, so how can it be used? You can't. Now, the first sliver, well, on a clear night that can be seen, yes. But you get some cloud, and you'll never see it. It's too haphazard, it's too hit and miss. So how can a sliver ever be used for a reliable timing for the feast when there is a chance you will not see it? But the full moon is easily spotted in the night sky, and most all the time it can be spotted through cloud. If not, for a few days before the full moon is actually here, we can tell exactly how many days the full moon is away by how much light the moon is reflecting. And to me it's so simple, and it fits in with the scripture to use a full moon. So the two most important aspects of the timing of the called out assembly meetings, the day cycle and the moon phase, which moon phase to follow, are totally different and opposed to traditionally held beliefs. They are opposite to the teachings of the rabbis, to the teachings of Judaism, different from the teachings of religion, and even different from most of the Messianic movement. But now we have a choice, as we always do, to follow the teachings of men or the words of the Creator, the plain and simple words of Yahuwah. We can follow traditions or our Creator. That is our only choice, the one we all have to make at some time. Then, when we have made it, we must accept the consequences of that choice, be they good or bad, be they life or death. But if we make a bad choice, we can change whilst there's still time. But there is coming a time when that time, exactly the time to change, will run out. Okay, verse 27. Verse 27 goes on to say, on the 10th day of this restored moon is a day of coverings and reconciliations. The word translated out day is Yom and is rendered in the singular. So this is again talking of one specific 24-hour day. It is not rendered in the plural, further showing that this awesome and empowering day is one singular day and not a 2-day 48-hour affair. Now let's come to the word Kippurim, plural Kippur, and it's prefixed with the definite article, making it the day of the coverings and reconciliations, or even better still, making it a day of the coverings. It's the coverings and reconciliations, and it is in plural because of its multiple happenings to multiple people. So this is one specific day for one specific purpose, and that is to cover us so our natural natures will no longer be seen, and we will be completely reconciled when the Messiah, meaning the useful tool and anointed implement of Yahuwah, returns later on this awesome day. The word Kippur has its base meaning of covering or lid, as in the lid upon the Ark of the Covenant. And the root is kapha, meaning to cover, but it also carries the meaning of to reconcile. The act of atoning for sin is to be covered and reconciled. The Passover sacrifice, where the blood of the Messiah was willingly put on the upright post and the lintel of the stake that he was crucified upon, that torture implement became the doorway by which we must all enter in if we wish to be saved, covered and reconciled. It is the only doorway onto the very narrow path which leads us to the family home of Yahuwah. Any other way belongs to the wide path, and it's filled with thieves and robbers, and it leads to destruction. The first Passover in Mitzrayim, or Egypt, was a forerunner to the final fulfillment of Yahushua, when the family members had to go into the homes beyond the door, which was covered by the blood of the Lamb, in order to escape the death of the firstborn. And it is the very same here. We must enter in through that amazing doorway, the one smeared with the blood of the Lamb, Yahushua, in order to be redeemed, reconciled, and saved from the coming destruction and final judgment before our Father in heaven, before the Almighty. Now, atonement, the action of making amends for a wrong or injury. Now, the word itself comes from the original idea of being at one meant. That is, being at one, in harmony, no longer in a state of hostility with another person or being. A price is paid, like a ransom is paid for wrongdoing. A ransom is paid for a sin against another. It's our redemption price. The price is for our sinning that is missing the mark of the standard of the Torah set by the Creator within his instructions, the Torah, is death. And the consequences of sinning is, after death, the soul, the body, is separated from the Creator eternally. So the redemption price has to be a death. That's what it is. And that was freely paid by the Son Yahushua, and his blood was spread on the doorpost and lintel. So, as the redemption price is paid for all those who would accept it unto themselves, and all those who walk through the doorway of Passover, through Matzah, which deals with the consequences of our sin, separation from the Creator, then we are made at one meant. We are no longer at variance with him. We are no longer enemies. We no longer have hostile relations with the Creator. We are at peace with him. We are covered by the redemption price. But we're still stained. So we need to be covered by the garments of light provided on this awesome, inspiring day. It's so our nakedness and our shame will no longer be visible. This is a day, sometime in the very near future, where we will have to answer and respond to the call. So we have to answer the summons to appear before our spiritual mother, the set-apart spirit, in order to be covered with her garments of light. Yes, this day, as we shall see, is of utmost importance if we want to spend eternity in the family of Yahuwah. So this is the day of the coverings and reconciliation. And yes, we do indeed need to be covered and covered up. Our nakedness and shame needs to be covered. And it brings to mind the account of Adam and Eve, or Kavah, in the garden. I can't quite get the sounds of the names and words, Hebrew words, right at the time, so please forgive me. But Adam and Kavah, or Eve, in the enclosed garden. Now, they were there for an unknown period of time. For they could have been walking for thousands of years before they willingly chose to ignore and go against the instructions of Yahuwah, where the eating of the forbidden fruit was concerned. And all the time they were walking around in that garden, they never saw their nakedness. And they had no shame, but they were still naked. I wonder why. Some say this is just because they were innocent. But no, I don't think so. I think this is far too simplistic. It's I would even go to say that's the sort of answer an ignorant child would say. No, I think there was a far more important reason they never saw their nakedness. And that was because they were not naked. There was no shame because they were initially covered. And I say they were covered by the garments of the set apart spirit of Yahuwah. They were covered by her garments of light. But when they willingly chose to miss the mark and sin, she left them. Her coverings left them. And they wouldn't be back until the redemption price was paid by the Messiah. The Spirit simply cannot countenance sin. Didn't King David, as we say now, say, "Please do not take your set apart spirit from me"? David knew that when he falls short of the Torah, his instructions for living, then the Spirit leaves until we are renewed through repentance. And so I believe it is the case with Adam and Kavah. When they sinned, the Spirit left them, leaving them naked and ashamed, and for the first time in God knows how many eons they saw their own natural state of being. Naked, ashamed, alone and separated. And this is what this awesome day, I believe, is all about. The reclothing of Yahuwah's family with the Spirit's garments of light. That's what today is about. We are told that this is a set apart and special assembly meeting, a summons, a calling together to be covered in her garments of light, to be reclothed in clean clothes. That's the end of part 2, and I'll carry on in part 3. Shalom, shalom.